Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Goodie Nation podcast. We are continuing to bring you some of the dopest people who are just spreading positivity in the innovation economy, in media, in whatever it is that they do. Because, we need all the positivity right now. And so we have a very special guest. We have Sherrell Dorsey, who's with us today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Oh, you are on mute.
Mhm. Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course, of course. And so, if we could just start off with having you introduce yourself and telling everyone a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah. So again, my name is Sherrell Dorsey. I am an award-winning journalist, data journalist, and entrepreneur. I host the TED Tech podcast and work on several projects, particularly in the climate tech space, really working at this intersection of innovation, climate, as well as this kind of idea around human-centered climate solutions.
Amazing. And so, I would love to know a little bit, how did you get into the sustainability space?
Yeah, so I actually, oddly enough, born and raised in Seattle, technology was such a tremendous part of my background, but decided that I wanted to have a more enriching collegiate experience that would usher me into this space of entrepreneurship. I kind of grew up in that era, or at least was in school in that era of like the dorm room, excuse me, the dorm room founder. And I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology for undergrad and got an opportunity to really work inside various startups in the fashion space that were specifically building very mission driven companies, hyper focused on sustainability, smarter, more sustainable ingredient sourcing or textile sourcing. And so I had this unique opportunity to both take coursework in more responsible and sustainable business practices, while at the same time, just learning the ins and outs of what does it mean to create a company and really design for conscious consumers. And so it was really this kind of hippie space, like Whole Foods was really popping around that time. And you started to see more designers and more beauty brands start to think about, okay, what are the chemicals that are creating all of these health challenges for us, and how do we pull back from that but still create this idea around efficacy? At the same time, I started writing freelance for different publications that were in the sustainability space, whether it was sustainable fashion like Eco Habit or in Habitat, from everything from like architecture to how technology is transforming this idea of sustainability. And so that really was my first foray into covering sustainability from a business perspective. And it drove so much of my interest in how do we, even from a standpoint of creating more founders and more innovations, particularly in communities of color, how do we use this as an opportunity to step into spaces where we are driving solutions in our communities and creating new opportunities. So for instance, I remember doing a couple of stories for Black Enterprise on some different business owners who were creating job opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals doing solar panel installation. And I just thought that was like the dopest thing. And that really led to me being in this space of journalism and also documenting how innovation was creating pathways for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color in particular. So from there, I went from strictly sustainability into all primarily like how tech and innovation is shaping kind of this new future. And I launched The Plug in 2016, which was a data-driven insights and news platform that covered the Black innovation economy. I really developed a category around deriving data and insights in that space. So I'm kind of in this space of like returning home to my sustainability roots for the most part, for lack of a better term. But I think that sustainability and climate solutions touches every single thing that we do. And right now, it's such a critical time for us to be thinking about what's happening to the planet and how can we use everything we understand about innovation to solve really pressing challenges in our society.
What a fascinating sort of the points of connection, fashion, sustainability, innovation, journalism, and how it all sort of works together. And I think after just, we just finished Earth Month, having folks who are still on the ground in the sustainability space all year round is super important. So very interesting. I love that you are now, as you said, sort of returning to your roots in sustainability, but also promoting the innovation space for Black and Brown folks. And so here at Goodie Nation, we work to bridge the relationship gap. It sounds like this sort of high level ethereal thing, but bridging relationship gaps and making, connections and having people be in rooms with people who can, help make decisions or introduce them to the next person that is important for their journey is pivotal for so many founders and innovators. And so I would love to know, for you, has there been a time in your life where a relationship, whether that was with a colleague or a family member or a freelancer, a relationship that was pivotal to you in your journey?
I think several relationships, right? I think that you are inspired throughout your journey, be it through bosses, mentors. I think about my grandfather who bought me and my cousin our very first computers, and just how, his belief in that, technology was important and significant, drove my interest in it. I think about Trish Malign Zizico, who started the Technology Access Foundation in Seattle, where I grew up, who, was really influential in creating a space for inner city kids to learn, to learn technology and to, be transformed by the opportunity in technology. So like I got my first couple of internships at Microsoft as a high school student, working over the summers for various teams. And so, I really recall, that relationship being a catalyst to so much of what I do today. And, I think just through the practice of being curious about the world, being curious about and taking a look at like, where are the advantages and disadvantages in my community? What am I seeing are barriers to entry and to access? And then, going to school in a place like New York City, it just challenges you to think much more broadly about what's possible. And then I think when you get into the space of entrepreneurship and you're someone who learns how to fundamentally create something out of nothing, you're always kind of paired or exposed to people who think so very differently, people who truly know how to make things move and, push forward. And you learn, the art of structuring partnerships, the art of movement building and community building. And so I think that there are so many teachers. I'll kind of simplify the question to say there's so many people that I've learned from through this journey. Many people who've been even divergent from me, not coming from the same backgrounds, not coming from the same educational experiences, or even, socioeconomic status, right? Just people that I've been able to learn from. And, people who have created communities and spaces that have just been essential to how I think. I think about like the first time I ever subscribed to Seth Godin's emails. I've probably been a subscriber for almost 2 decades now. And he's a pretty famous marketer and speaker and, in the business community. But I constantly find myself inspired by his work and, others who, ask us and challenge us to think differently, to create differently, to show up differently. And so, I think that, there's not one person or one even space particularly. I think even like knowing Joy Womack, who's the founder of Goodie Nation, and us connecting, virtually, and just, sharing and him supporting me with, building of the plug and some other things that I was doing. I think there's always, again, a teacher or a supportive hand of, someone who kind of helps you along, or people who help you along your journey.
Yes, once again, I think that's a beautiful mix of different points of connection, family, colleagues, people who, you're reading their newsletters. Yes, these tiny relationships could eventually blossom into something greater. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. And so to kind of flip the question a little bit, these are some of the people who had an impact on you. I would love to know what impacts do you hope to leave on your industry, your community, 50 years from now when everyone's like, Sherrell, like what impact do you want?
Yeah. I like to think that so much of my work has impacted people. I sold the plug in 2023, and even before selling it, I mean, we would get, emails from founders who have been featured in the plug who said, oh, we got a feature, when you all featured us, we got, a check, from an investor. Like this investor reached out. We had so many of those amazing stories of founders that felt supported or people who got connected or joined teams just based off of our reporting. There were firms and institutional, investors who were able to raise funds to invest in Black and Brown founders based off of the data that we have been collecting. I remember once I was doing a staycation and I was leaving the hotel, and the young man who pulled up my car at valet had reached out to me on Instagram and had said to me, "Oh, like you looked familiar. You looked really familiar. Because of your book. I wrote a book that came out in 2021 called Upper Hand, The Future of Work for the Rest of Us, which really hyper-focused on what are going to be the technologies and careers that are going to shape, the world in the next decade, and how can, Black and Brown folks, get trained up for it. And this young man had reached out to me on the gram and was like, because of your book, I started getting into cloud computing, and I'm going to be getting this certificate, I believe. I think he was getting a certificate in cloud computing and like launching, a career for himself, in technology as a result. So a lot of times, like we don't even know that the work we're putting out there into the world, who it's going to reach. And, I think about impact in the way of I'm supposed to do my work as an offering. And especially as a journalist, I see being an information broker and someone who can create platforms and worlds where people can access insights, information, and, thinking differently about what they can do and what they're capable of or where they can innovate and solve big problems. I think about that as an offering and an opportunity for people to take what they need to then go out and create. So, I hope, or I won't say I hope, I know that my work is impactful, and I always try to be in a space of doing necessary work and ensuring that people have access, whether they know that I'm behind that or not. I've created many things that, that helped and benefited people that will never know that this was an opportunity I created. And I'm not sure that that's the point. I'm not sure if the point for me at this stage in my life and in my career is about me getting recognition. I think I just want to see that that every person has an opportunity to create and contribute, their genius, into the world. And if I can be a catalyst for unlocking that, then, I'm personally rewarded by knowing that, hey, there are people who will benefit, and they will go on to create avenues and opportunities for others.
Every person having the opportunity to create and contribute their genius to the world. Beautiful, beautiful. So my final question for you is, founders, especially in this current socio-political climate, so much to worry about with the business formally, with relationship building, with networking, with making sure they're keeping up with the trends, with reading the books, with reading the articles.
Wow.
For folks who may be a little overwhelmed in this particular time, do you have any advice for anyone who may be struggling and thinking, how am I supposed to keep up with all of these things in the midst of trying to build a business?
And there may be a lot of people that disagree with me, but I believe that if you focus on your work and creating what you're supposed to create, your network will find you. That was certainly the case for me in so many different ways. And that's not to say that you're doing your work in a silo. You still have to talk about it. You still have to do your work in public. You still need to share your wins, share your process, whether that's through a monthly newsletter or if you want to share it across social media. But, focus on creating something compelling and formidable and document that process so that you can walk people through your thinking. You can walk people through the highs and lows of your decision making. You honor your team in the process. But I think that because the world is very noisy and there's just so many opportunities for distraction, hyper focusing on building something dope is so much more significant for longevity versus just diluting your building experience and your learning experience by just trying to be in the right rooms. I guarantee you that the right rooms will find you, and the right opportunities will unlock as well.
Well, speaking of focusing on dope things that are being built, if people want to find out more about you and to keep up with all the things that you've got going on, what is the best way for them
Yeah.
to do that?
Yeah, definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'm also at SherrellDorsey.com. It's going to be a great way to actually join my personal newsletter called Regenerative. And I break down the opportunities in sustainable innovation. So it's definitely a place to go if you are curious about what's happening in climate, but particularly from a business standpoint, because there's going to be lots of significant changes and lots of wealth building opportunities. So it's just SherrellDorsey.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Sherrell_Dorsey. So would love to connect.
Fantastic. Well, Sherrell, thank you so much. I'm dropping all the gems. I'm going to go hyper focus on building something right after this. But yes, everyone, another amazing episode of the Goodie Nation podcast. And we will be joining you next week. So take it easy.
Awesome.